Welcome to my story. My family owns a small cabin in the woods, nestled deep in the remote corners of Michigan. It's nothing fancy, a simple structure surrounded by towering pine trees, miles from the nearest neighbor. My parents bought it years ago as a peaceful retreat from city life. Growing up, my brother Eric and I spent countless weekends there, creating our own adventures in the dense forest. This story happened 12 years ago when I was 9, and Eric was 12. It was late winter, and the ground was blanketed in fresh snow. We'd arrived at the cabin for a weekend getaway, and as always, the forest seemed like our personal playground. That afternoon, we decided to play one of our favorite games, a scavenger hunt. The rules were simple. We'd hide a bright red flag somewhere in the woods and take turns trying to find it. It was Eric's turn to hide the flag. He dashed off with it, telling me to wait inside the cabin until he blew a whistle to signal the game had begun. I waited eagerly, staring out the frosted window as snowflakes fell in a lazy spiral. Minutes passed, but there was no whistle. After 10 minutes, I began to wonder if he'd forgotten. Impatient, I grabbed my jacket, hat, and flashlight, just in case it got dark, and headed out to find him. The cold hit me instantly, but I was determined. Eric's footprints in the fresh snow were easy to follow. They led me deeper into the woods, past the familiar trails we'd marked over the years. As I walked, the trees grew denser, and the silence of the forest felt heavier, almost oppressive. Eventually, I reached a clearing I didn't recognize. At its center stood an old, dilapidated barn. It was strange. I'd never seen it before, despite all our exploring. Eric's footprints led straight to it. The barn looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Its wooden planks were warped and cracked, and the large double doors hung slightly ajar. I hesitated, calling out for Eric, but my voice seemed swallowed by the snow-covered trees. There was no answer. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and damp wood. My flashlight beam danced across cobwebs and old farming tools. Then I saw them, Eric's footprints, leading further into the barn. "Eric," I called, my voice trembling. Still no answer. I followed the footprints to a ladder leading up to a hayloft. My heart pounded as I climbed, the wooden rungs creaking under my weight. When I reached the top, I found the red flag lying in the middle of the loft. But Eric wasn't there. That's when I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound coming from below. I froze, gripping the flag tightly. Peering over the edge, I saw movement in the shadows near the barn doors. At first, I thought it was Eric, but then I realized it was too tall, too hunched. The figure stepped into the faint light streaming through the cracked walls. It wasn't Eric, it was something else. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its gaunt frame. Long, bony fingers dragged across the floor as it moved. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if listening for something. My breath caught in my throat as its head snapped upward, and I saw its face. Hollow, empty eyes and a mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. I ducked out of sight, trying to stifle my breathing. The creature let out a low, guttural growl and began climbing the ladder. I panicked, looking for an escape. The only way out was a small window on the far side of the loft. I scrambled toward it, kicking over a pile of old hay in my rush. That's when I saw it, another set of footprints, smaller than Eric's, leading to the window. Someone else had been here before. I didn't have time to think. The creature was halfway up the ladder, its grotesque hands grasping the rungs. I pushed the window open and climbed out, landing hard in the snow below. I ran. I didn't look back, even as I heard the barn door slam open behind me. The forest seemed endless, the trees closing in around me. My legs burned and my lungs ached, but I didn't stop until I saw the warm glow of the cabin's lights through the trees. Bursting inside, I found Eric sitting at the table with our parents. He looked pale and shaken. "Where were you?" I demanded. "I got lost," he said. "But when I found the barn, I saw something. It was coming toward me, so I ran." Our parents tried to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, but Eric and I knew better. The next morning, we went back to the barn with Dad, but it was gone. All we found was an open clearing and a single red flag lying in the snow. To this day, I don't know what we saw in that barn or how it vanished. But I've never gone back to those woods, and I never will.